Now we have chapter 8, a hand at cards. You may want to take a lot of notes in your own book as I'm talking here about just all the plot developments that will unfold in this chapter. There's a lot that's going to happen here. So we're picking up with Mr. Cruncher and Miss Pross going to buy groceries, and it describes how they're crossing the Pont Neuf, which is a bridge across the River Seine in Paris that goes from the right to the left bank, and they're heading to the markets and the shops. There's a reference here, which is definitely an historical one, that they see the barges, which is where the smiths worked, making guns for the Army of the Republic. So there were like gun making, sort of weapon making activities happening on barges in the Seine during that time. It says that they purchased a few groceries, some oil for the lamp, and then they went to a wine shop to get the wine they wanted. And it's interesting, they're not just buying bottles of wine, they like have it poured out into a container, which is what happens at Monsieur Defarge's wine shop too, from some larger barrel of wine. So they go into this wine shop, and as they approach the counter, which when it says the two outlandish customers, this would be Miss Pross and Mr. Cruncher. And what he means by outlandish is they just, they just sort of look out of place. And they show what they wanted. And as their wine was being measured out, a man parted from another man in a corner and rose to depart. In going, he had to face Miss Pross. No sooner did he face her than Miss Pross uttered a scream and clapped her hands. So who on earth is this mystery man who Miss Pross is alarmed to see? Everybody in the wine shop is on their feet. Everybody thinks something terrible happened because of the way she screams. And it goes on to describe that in great detail, which is typical of Dickens, but not necessarily all that important. And then, "What is the matter?" said the man who had caused Miss Pross to scream, speaking in a vexed, abrupt voice, though in a low tone and in English. "Oh, Solomon, dear Solomon," cried Miss Pross. So it's her brother in this wine shop. "After not setting eyes upon you or hearing of you for so long, how do I find you here?" And he gets angry with her. He says, "Don't call me Solomon. Do you want to be the death of me?" And she bursts into tears, and she's like, "I'm your sister. Aren't you happy to see me? Have I ever been so hard with you that you ask me such a cruel question?" And then he yells at her, "Well, then hold your meddlesome tongue and come out if you want to speak to me. Pay for the wine and come out. Who's this man?" Talking about Mr. Cruncher. And Miss Pross says, "Oh, it's Mr. Cruncher. Let him come out too. Does he think me a ghost?" Apparently Mr. Cruncher did, to judge from his looks. He said not a word, however, and Miss Pross, exploring the depths of her ridicule through her tears with great difficulty, paid for her wine. So they go outside, and they get around into a dark corner of the street, and Solomon says, "Now what do you want?" I mean, remember, Miss Pross hasn't seen him in a long time. What's interesting too is we know that he took all her money. He wasn't a very good brother to her. So it's interesting how happy she is to see him. And she says, "How dreadfully unkind in a brother. Nothing has ever turned my love away from, to give me such a greeting and show me no affection." So he says, "Oh, okay," and he gives her a little kiss. "Now, are you content?" And her brother says, "If you expect me to be surprised, I am not surprised. I knew you were here." Interesting. "I know of most people who are here. If you really don't want to endanger my existence, which I half believe you do, go your way as soon as possible and let me go mine. I am busy. I am an official." So this implies he works for the government. So remember, he's English. "My English brother Solomon," mourned Miss Pross, casting up her fraught eyes. "That had the makings in him of one of the best and greatest of men in his native country, an official among foreigners, and such foreigners." So she's not happy about this news. And her brother says, "Oh, I knew it. You want to be the death of me. I shall be rendered suspected by my own sister. just as I am getting on. So he's like, just leave me alone. I'm trying to make a living. So they have this argument continues. And she says, say but one affectionate word to me and tell me there is nothing angry or estranged between us, and I will detain you no longer. So she just wants to know that they're still like family to each other. And so he says, this is interesting, as if the estrangement between them had come of any culpability of hers, as if Mr. Lorry had not known it for a fact years ago in the quiet corner in Soho that this precious brother had spent her money and left her. So I'm not really sure here. It seems to me like Mr. Lorry might know more about Solomon than Miss Pross does. I mean, given how happy she is to see him, I'm imagining that she has some idea that he took her money, but maybe she doesn't realize all the bad deeds he had done in the past, because it just seems like Mr. Lorry knows. But remember, Mr. Lorry's not in this conversation. It's just Jerry Cruncher and Miss Pross and Solomon. So he says an affectionate word. He does what she asks. And then Mr. Cruncher asks an unexpected question. He says, I say, might I ask a favor as to whether your name is John Solomon or Solomon John? The official, meaning Solomon, turned towards him with sudden distrust. He had not previously uttered a word. Come, said Mr. Cruncher, speak out. You know. She calls you Solomon. She must know, being her sister. And I know you're John, you know. Which of the two goes first? And regarding that name of Pross, likewise, that weren't your name over the water. So now we know why Jerry Cruncher was looking at him like he'd seen a ghost, because Jerry recognizes Solomon from some other something. And Solomon pretends like he doesn't know what he's talking about. What do you mean? And Jerry Cruncher's like, no, I swear you had a different name. It had 2 syllables. If you haven't figured out by now, this is John Barsad. Remember, John Barsad was the witness against Charles Darnay at the Old Bailey. He was a spy. He still is a spy, clearly, since he's an official and now works for the French. Barsad, said another voice striking in. That's the name for £1,000, cried Jerry. The speaker who struck in was Sidney Carton. Okay, so we have a lot of people all of a sudden showing up on the streets in Paris. So we have John Barsad, who is apparently actually Solomon, Miss Pross's brother. We have Jerry Cruncher, who recognizes him. And now all of a sudden we have Sidney Carton, who also recognizes him. Don't be alarmed, my Miss Pross, says Sidney. I arrived at Mr. Lorry's to his surprise yesterday evening. We agreed that I would not present myself elsewhere until all is well, or unless I could be useful. I present myself here to beg a little talk with your brother. I wish you had a better employed brother than Mr. Barsad. I wish for your sake Mr. Barsad was not a sheep of the prisons. Sheep was a cant word of the time for a spy under the gaolers. So he was a spy working in the prison, I'm sure listening in, trying to see what prisoners are talking about, trying to find other information about other people who are not yet in prison, who might be targeted to go to prison. So he's a spy, and now John Barsad is very pale because he knows that, Sidney Carton knows what he does. And then Sidney Carton goes on to say, I lighted on you, Mr. Barsad, coming out of the prison of the conciergerie while I was contemplating the walls an hour or more ago. So he literally saw Mr. Barsad coming out of the conciergerie. You have a face to be remembered, and I remember faces well. Make curious by seeing you in that connection and having a reason to which you are no stranger for associating you with the misfortunes of a friend, now very unfortunate. I walked in your direction. I walked into the wine shop here, close after you, and I sat near you. I had no difficulty in deducing from your unreserved conversation and the rumor openly going about among your admirers the nature of your calling, and gradually what I had done at random seemed to shape itself into a purpose, Mr. Barsad. So Sidney is saying he saw him coming out of the prison. He recognized him. He followed him into the wine shop. And then he sat nearby and eavesdropped on his conversation and confirmed that he is indeed a spy in the jails. What purpose, the spy asked. Poor John Barsad has nothing he can really say here. He's been completely exposed. It would be troublesome and might be dangerous to explain in the street. Could you favor me in confidence with some minutes of your company at the office of Tellson's Bank, for instance? Under a threat? Asked John Barsad. Oh, did I say that? Then why should I go there? Really, Mr. Barsad, I can't say if you can't. So they have this little bantering back and forth, but really at the end of the day, John Barsad has to follow Sidney Carton because Sidney Carton has a lot of information about him. So Carton's negligent recklessness of manner came powerfully in aid of his quickness and skill in such a business as he had in his secret mind, and with such a man as he had to do with. His practiced eye saw it and made the most of it. Now I told you so, said the spy. If any trouble comes to this, it's your doing. Come, Mr. Barsad, said Sidney. Don't be ungrateful. For my great respect for your sister, I might not have led up so pleasantly to a little proposal that I wish to make for our mutual satisfaction. Do you go with me to the bank? So yes, he'll go with him. So he's like, I could do worse, but because I care about your sister, I'm going to give you, a little chance to preserve your anonymity and possibly like your current position. So they get to the bank. He says, at first, let's conduct your sister safely to the corner of her own street. Let me take your arm, Miss Pross. So Sidney walks Miss Pross. This is not a good city at this time for you to be out, unprotected. And as your escort knows, Mr. Barsad, I will invite him to Mr. Lorry's with us. Are we ready? Come. So off they go. Miss Pross recalled soon afterwards, and to the end of her life remembered, that as she pressed her hands on Sidney's arm and looked up in his face, imploring him to do no hurt to Solomon, there was a braced purpose in the arm and a kind of inspiration in the eyes, which not only contradicted his light manner, but changed and raised the man. She was too much occupied then with fears for her brother, who so little deserved her affection, and Sidney's friendly reassurances adequately to heed what she observed. So this is important. This could be a quote maybe that you might use for a paper. She recognizes that Carton seems different. So we've already had now one character definitely becoming what we would call a dynamic character, which is Dr. Manette, because he changes and becomes empowered and strong by helping Charles Darnay. Here, for some reason, Carton is changing. He has inspiration in his eyes. He seems warm, friendly. He's different. And so this is an important element of this story. So when they finally get there, Sidney says, this is Miss Pross's brother, Mr. Barsad. He introduces him to Mr. Lorry. Mr. Lorry remembers this name, Barsad. I have an association with that name and with the face. And Carton says, I told you you had a remarkable face, Mr. Barsad. Please sit down. He takes a chair. He supplied the link that Mr. Lorry wanted by saying to him with a frown that he was a witness at the trial. So Mr. Lorry remembers that and regarded his new visitor with an undisguised look of abhorrence. So, this is an enemy. This is a man who, was trying to put Charles Darnay not only in prison, but to death in England. And now here he is sitting in the bank. Mr. Barsad has been recognized by Miss Pross as the affectionate brother you have heard of. This is sarcastic because, of course, he's not affectionate, says Sidney, and has acknowledged the relationship. I pass to worse news. Darnay has been arrested again. So we know this. But Mr. Lorry does not. Struck with consternation, the old gentleman exclaimed, what do you tell me? I left him safe just 2 hours ago. And, when was it done, Mr. Barsad? And Mr. Barsad acknowledges it was just now. And Sidney says, Mr. Barsad is the best authority possible, as I have it from Mr. Barsad's communication to a friend and brother sheep over a bottle of wine that the arrest has taken place. So he's telling Mr. Lorry that he is now a spy at the prison. Mr. Lorry's business eye read in the speaker's face that it was loss of time to dwell upon this point. So it's like moving on. There's too many details all of a sudden coming up. So Sidney says, now I trust that the name and influence of Dr. Manette may stand him as good stead tomorrow. You said he would be before the tribunal again tomorrow, Mr. Barsad. And Mr. Barsad says yes. So Carton says, hopefully it will be fine tomorrow because of Dr. Manette's influence, but it may not be so. I'm shaken, Mr. Lorry, by Dr. Manette's not having had the power to prevent this arrest. And Mr. Lorry said he may not have known of it. But the circumstance would be alarming, which of course it is. I mean, Dr. Manette had all the influence to get Darnay out of prison. How did that only last for 2 hours? In short, said Sidney, this is a desperate time when desperate games are played for desperate stakes. Let the doctor play the winning game. I will play the losing one. No man's life here is worth purchase. Anyone carried home by the people today may be condemned tomorrow. Now, the stake I have resolved to play for, in case of the worst, is a friend of the conciergerie, and the friend I purpose to myself to win is Mr. Barsad. So he's saying that he wants to work somehow with Mr. Barsad. You need to have good cards, said the spy. Like, you need to have a good reason. How would I possibly trust you? And Carton says, well, I'll see what I've got here. You know what a brute I am. I wish you'd give me a little brandy. So he's like, I need a drink, which we know Carton always needs a drink. So he has brandy. And then he says to Mr. Barsad, sheep of the prison, emissary of Republican committees, now turnkey, now prisoner, always spy and secret informer. He's like, you represent yourself to the employer under a false name. That's a very good card, Mr. Barsad. Now you're in the employ of the Republican of the French government. You were formerly in the employ of the aristocratic English government, the enemy of France and freedom. So he's saying, like, you used to be a spy for England, now you're a spy for France. And currently, England and France are considered enemies. Remember, other countries in Europe, and this would include England, even though in that time it was not part of Europe, are very much against what is happening in France because they killed their king. He says that's an excellent card. Inference clear as day in this region of suspicion that Mr. Barsad, still in the pay of the aristocratic English government, is the spy of the pit, the treacherous foe of the Republic, crouching in its bosom. So he is like still being paid as if he were a spy for the English. And when they reference the Pitt, this means the prime minister at the time. His name was William Pitt in England. So he's, Sidney knows that he is literally, working for both sides here, and that if either of them knew, he would be in big trouble. So he says, that you're an English traitor, an agent of all mischief, so much spoken of and so difficult to find. That's a card not to be beaten. Have you followed my hand, Mr. Barsad? Not to understand your play, returned the spy somewhat uneasily. So it's like, yeah, okay, I understand. Like, you know, like all about me. But Barsad is the spy. He's the one who has inside knowledge of what's happening in France. And so he has power. But the problem is that Carton's card is that he knows everything about Barsad and could easily use it against him. I play my ace, denunciation of Mr. Barsad to the nearest section committee. Look over your hand, Mr. Barsad, see what you have, don't hurry. So he's like, what can you offer me? Because I could turn you in any minute. It was a poorer hand, and this is interesting. Mr. Barsad saw losing cards in it that Sidney Carton knew nothing of. So Barsad knows that his life, his history is even worse than what Sidney's aware of. It says he was thrown out of his honorable employment in England through too much unsuccessful hard swearing there, not because he was not wanted there. Our English reasons for vaunting Our superiority to secrecy and spies are of very modern date. He knew that he had crossed the channel and accepted service in France, first as a tempter and an eavesdropper among his own countrymen, and then gradually as a tempter and eavesdropper among the natives. He knew that under the overthrown government, he had been a spy upon Saint Antoine and the Defarges wine shop. We remember when he visited there. He had received from the watchful police such heads of information concerning Dr. Manette's imprisonment, release, and history as should serve him for an introduction to familiar conversation with the Defarges, and tried them on Madame Defarge. Remember this, she had no, she was not going to tell him anything or share with him anything. And he had broken down with them signally. He always remembered with fear and trembling that the terrible woman had knitted when she talked with her, or when he talked with her, and had looked ominously at him as her fingers moved. He had since seen her in the section of Saint Antoine over and over again produce her knitted registers and denounce people whose lives the guillotine were surely swallowed up. So he knew that like his name was on her list, basically. He knew, as everyone employed as he did, that he was never safe, that flight was impossible, that he was tied fast under the shadow of the axe, and that in spite of his utmost tergiversation, that's a really unusual word, and treachery and furtherance of the reigning terror, a word might bring it down upon him. Once denounced, that would be the end of him. So like he has to keep all these people sort of that are threatening him at bay and have some sort of value where he feels like he's protected. So he turns to Mr. Lorry and he says, like, I don't really, he doesn't have anything to offer. He looks at Mr. Lorry like, can you help me? You're a gentleman. He also makes a sort of, disparaging comment about Sidney Carton, who doesn't look like much of a gentleman himself. And I just wrote here, he questions Carton's status or sort of class because he looks like a bum. And Carton just jumps in and says, I play my ace. I think I'm going to win this game. And he says, I should have hoped, gentlemen both, said the spy, looking at Mr. Lorry, that your respect for my sister. So he's like, well, I'd hope, like, since you like my sister, that you would spare me. Of course, he had no interest in his sister just a few moments ago, but now he's using her, hoping that that'll help save his life or his future. And Sidney says, I could not better testify my respect for your sister than by finally relieving her of her brother. Like, the best thing I could do from his pros is get rid of you because you are not a good brother. So then he goes on to say, Sidney says, indeed, now I think again, I have a strong impression that I have another good card here. That friend and fellow sheep who spoke of himself as pasturing in the country prisons, who was he? And the spy says, French, you don't know him. French, huh? Says Carton. Well, he may be. I assure you, said the spy, though it's not important. Oh, but it is important, says Carton. I know the face. I think not. I'm sure not. It can't be, said the spy. It can't be, muttered Sidney Carton. Can't be, spoke good French. Yet like a foreigner, I thought. Provincial, said the spy. No, foreign, cried Carton. Cly, disguise, but the same man. We had that man before us at the Old Bailey. So Carton now is telling him, I know your friend who's the spy, and that his name is Roger Cly. So remember Roger Cly. Roger Cly was the other spy at the Old Bailey who got up and testified along with Barsad against Charles Darnay. And apparently he is in France. And this, I'm sure you don't remember this. This is way back from the beginning of the book. But Roger Cly was the man who was supposedly dead when the funeral procession came through Fleet Street, and Jerry Cruncher followed the funeral procession and then went that night to rob the grave and found the casket empty. Do you remember this at all? This is what happened. So Barsad says, now there, sir, you are hasty. There you really give me an advantage over you. Cly, who I will admit was a partner of mine, has been dead for several years. I attended him in his last illness. He was buried in London at the Church of St. Pancras in the Fields. And then here, Mr. Lorry became aware from where he sat of a most remarkable goblin shadow on the wall. Tracing it to its source, he discovered it was the sudden extraordinary rising and stiffening of all the risen and stiff hair on Mr. Cruncher's head. So Jerry Cruncher remembers this. He remembers this funeral and the burial at St. Pancras in the Fields. And let us be reasonable, said the spy. Let us be fair. To show you how mistaken you are and what an unfounded assumption yours is, I will lay before you a certificate of Cly's burial, which I happen to have carried in my pocketbook. Okay, why on earth would you carry around for years someone's death certificate? Clearly because maybe he has to make sure he can prove it. Look, he says, you may take it in your hand. It's no forgery. Here, Mr. Lorry perceived the reflection on the wall to elongate, and Mr. Cruncher rose, stepped forward. His hair could not have been more violently on end. Clearly, he's very, very alarmed. Unseen by the spy, Mr. Cruncher stood at his side and touched him on the shoulder like a ghostly bailiff. And Mr. Cruncher said, that there Roger Cly, mister? So you put him in his coffin? I did. And then Jerry says, who took him out of it? Barsad leaned back and stammered, what do you mean? He wasn't never in it. No, not he. I'll have my head took off if he ever was in it. I tell you, said Jerry, that you buried paving stones and earth in that coffin. Don't go and tell me that you buried Cly. It was a take-in. Me and 2 others know it. How do you know it? What's that to you? He's not going to tell him he's a grave robber. With your shameful impositions upon tradesmen. He's like, we went out there to rob that body and you put in stones instead. Sidney Carton, who's with Mr. Lorry, lost in amazement at this conversation, asked Mr. Cruncher to please explain. And Jerry says, at another time. He's not going to tell all these people that he had a second, job, quote unquote, as a body snatcher. Well, I see one thing, said Carton. I hold another card, Mr. Barsad. Impossible here in raging Paris with suspicion filling the air for you to outlive denunciation. So not only does Sidney know all these things about him, but apparently Jerry Cruncher does too. And also the fact that there's a spy who's alive and well, who everybody thinks is dead. So Barsad gives in. He says, okay, I give up. I confess that we were so unpopular with the outrageous mob that I only got away from England at the risk of being ducked to death, and that Cly was so ferreted up and down that he never would have gotten away at all but for the sham. Though now this man knows it was a sham, or how this man knows it was a sham is a wonder of wonders to me. Of course it is. So he admits it was true. So he moves on. Barsad's like, okay, enough of this game. You told me you had a proposal. What is it? Like, what do you want with me? What can I do for you so that I can get you off my back and go on with my miserable life? And Sidney says, not very much. You are a turnkey at the conciergerie, meaning he has a key to the prison. And the spy says, well, I tell you, once and for all, there's no such thing as an escape. Like, we're not going to get him out. And Sidney says, why need you tell me what I have not asked? He hasn't asked for any kind of escape. He just asks, are you a turnkey? And Barsad says, yes, I am sometimes. Can you be when you choose? And so he clarifies, well, I can pass in and out when I choose. Sidney Carton filled another glass with brandy, poured it slowly out upon the hearth, and watched it as it dropped. It all being spent, he said, rising, so far, we have spoken before these 2, because it was as well that the merits of the cards should not rest solely between you and me. Come into the dark room here and let us have one final word alone. So he's saying that he had, exposed him for who he is in front of other people, so there would be a witness. But now the conversation he wants to have must be private. So the details that you have to make sure you've caught here is that John Barsad is actually Miss Pross's brother Solomon. He is now a prison spy for the revolution, but he had been a spy for England. He is also in contact still with Roger Cly, who is also a French spy, who faked his own death in order to get out of the country and get to France without being caught by the English. And then Jerry exposes this fact that Roger faked his own death because Jerry had tried to snatch his body when he was buried all those years ago.